hearty welcome to one and all. We're back in the studio for episode 231 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Blue Monday with me here in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, we have a bit of a cross-referenced, cross-indexed episode today, which is Dan Aykroyd's 72nd birthday. Did not know that. I hate to say it, I thought he was a little older than that. But we're going to get back to one of our favorite series on the channel, and that is Guilty Pleasure Movies. So not only is today Dan Aykroyd's 72nd birthday, but this is the 16th entry into our continuing series of Guilty Pleasure Movies. And today's movie is the 1987 semi-classic takeoff, kind of a continuation of the old 60s TV series Dragnet, which starred Jack Webb and Harry Morgan. The name of the movie is Dragnet. And Dan Aykroyd plays the nephew of the Jack Webb character of Sergeant Joe Friday from the original TV series, and his co-star, Harry Morgan, plays now Captain Gannon. So Dan Aykroyd, for those who don't know, is an Academy Award nominee for Driving Miss Daisy, a 1989 film which ended up winning Best Picture in somewhat of an upset. 89 was a pretty good year for movies. You had films like Do the Right Thing and Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July, which many people to this day will say Tom Cruise should have gotten the Best Actor Oscar for that. And that's neither here nor there. But Dan Aykroyd was OG Saturday Night Live. He was part of the very early cast with Chevy Chase, and Gilda Radner, and Jane Curtin, and Garrett Morris, and John Belushi, and a marvelous talent. Now, Dragnet is a highly entertaining film with really an incredible cast, but it's trash. It is not a good movie. It's fun. It entertains us. It has a rewatchability factor. Honestly, Tom Hanks is a fucking riot. But it's not very good. There's enough plot holes, like they're the size of Swiss cheese. It's a Swiss cheese plot where there's just holes all over the place. We go with it because the actors are so engaging, and there are a number of very funny sequences. This was a point in Tom Hanks' career where he had just attempted a bit of a drama. He did the movie called Nothing in Common with the extraordinary Jackie Gleason, where he plays Gleason's somewhat estranged son, and Eva Marie Saint, iconically Cary Grant's co-star in North by Northwest, plays his mom. And Nothing in Common has moments of comedy, but ultimately it's a serious story about trying to reconnect before it's too late. I mean, Tom's performance is just okay. It's Gleason's movie. He barely registers. It really wasn't until A League of Their Own that Tom Hanks began to register the way that he has for the last 3+ decades. Doesn't mean he wasn't in good movies, even great movies, because he was. And gave terrific comedic performances. A League of Their Own, though, he does both. He nails the comedy and he nails the pathos of a character loosely based on what would have been the famous baseballer Jimmy Fox, who ended his career with 536 home runs, 2 more than the Mick. At least I think that's the case. I think Fox had 536 and Mickey had 534. I might have gotten it backwards. Ooh. But you get the idea. The character that Tom plays in A League of Their Own, which, as luck would have it, was also released on July 1st, in that case, 1992, Jimmy Dugan was supposed to be Jimmy Fox. There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball. No crying. But in Dragnet, Dan Aykroyd plays Sergeant Joe Friday, the namesake of the character from the original TV series, which was very successful. And Aykroyd, it's actually quite a skillful comedic performance. And there are certain movies you can point to in the 80s and into the 90s where it appears that Dan Aykroyd is on autopilot, just letting his kind of natural talent and charisma carry him. But in this movie, he gives a real performance. You can see the gears turning. And he tried and succeeded mimicking the very particular speech patterns of Jack Webb from the TV series. This was not an accident that he chose to read his lines in a very clipped, almost militaristic cadence. And casting Tom Hanks was a masterstroke. I don't know if it was that Tom's next movie that he shot was big or whether it was Punchline. I'm not sure about that. But Tom is still in full-on comedic mode, and his character of Pep Streebek is an absolute pistol. He is hilarious. He's a kind of streetwise cop, and he's not by the book, whereas Sergeant Joe Friday is by the book. So it takes the form of a buddy film. And oddly enough, earlier that year, you had the original Lethal Weapon, which in some quarters was marketed as an action comedy. It's not. Lethal Weapon is a straight-up action thriller with comedic asides. Dragnet is closer, when we think of action comedy, it's closer to the actual dictionary definition, if there is such a thing. But buddy film, the phrase kind of gets overused because there have been a lot of them. But this film is a comedy first and action movie second. It's more serious than, for example, the John Candy Eugene Levy from 1986, also a guilty pleasure movie, Armed and Dangerous. That movie could be marketed just as a comedy because, I mean, yeah, there's death and there's some nefarious goings on, but the film exists solely to make people laugh. Dragnet is mostly to make people laugh. Now, you have an incredible supporting cast behind the two leads of Aykroyd and Hanks. You have the marvelous, he passed a couple of years ago, Christopher Plummer as a kind of nefarious, was he a pastor or reverend? Jonathan Worley, great name, Jonathan Worley. And he plays this, he's basically a scumbag. He's one of those holier than thou, you have the right to my religion, and I'm not going to live my life at all according to how you must live your life because you have to listen to me because God, whatever. And you have another incredible comedic actor who also recently passed in Dabney Coleman, who plays essentially a sleazier Hugh Hefner. And I'm being serious when I say that. Hefner is world-class dignity compared to what we're presented with this scumbag, Jerry Caesar. So there's a kind of irony in that the character, played by Christopher Plummer, is looking to screw the porn merchant out of money, and it's like two sleazebags facing off. It's kind of a different approach, a very interesting through line. Now, when I saw this movie for the first time at age 14, I wasn't getting this deep and really trying to assess the mechanics of the plot, saying, wow, this is like in wrestling when Macho Man Randy Savage went against Jake Roberts and they were both bad guys. You got two scumbags fighting it out. But there's more going on in the story than just this kind of dick measuring contest between Jerry Caesar and Jonathan Worley. You have another character played by Alexandra Paul, very solid actress of the era. She was in a movie, I don't know if it was called Heavenly Bodies, but it was a movie basically about a young woman who undergoes a fitness and health transformation. She was actually really good in that film. But Dragnet is not just about Jonathan Worley kind of extorting money from Jerry Caesar. There appears to be this kind of satanic cult, which they call it a pagan cult. It's not really that much of a stretch. But just to hear Dan Aykroyd say, people against goodness and normalcy, Pagan, pagan. And then for Tom Hanks to unironically go, nice work, Joe. All but worth the price of admission right there. But there is this cult, and the character, her name is Connie Swale, played by Alexandra Paul. It seems that she's about to be sacrificed when our intrepid heroes rescue her. And well, why did they want to kill her? Well, they said they needed a virgin. And now you're getting into the Wicker Man territory, and not the Nicolas Cage horrific remake, but the original OG Wicker Man with Christopher Lee and Edward Woodward. And Britt Eklund, excuse me. Where it's like, oh, we have to sacrifice a virgin. What the fuck? For what? For what? Well, they had to sacrifice a virgin, this satanic cult, somehow operating in Los Angeles. But okay, we go with that too. It's total absurdity. Well, she's a virgin. Connie Swell. And then for the rest of the movie, she is never identified as Connie Swell. Connie Swell. She is always the virgin Connie Swell. The virgin Connie Swell. Well, our guys get in trouble, in serious hot water with the police department, and even with Captain Gannon's affection for the nephew of his former partner, they keep fucking up. They keep getting bad information. It's kind of like in The Untouchables when Kevin Costner and his guys early in the film think they're making a move on Capone and they are completely off the mark. It happens in this movie more than once. And it looks like our guys are screwed. They're going to lose their jobs and they might end up dead anyway. Like they wouldn't even be doing it for a purpose. Oh, at least we went out in a blaze of glory in the line of duty. No, you guys are about to be busted down to civvies. But it wouldn't be a movie if it was just Christopher Plummer doing dastardly things and eliminating Joe Friday and Pep Streebek. They rise to the occasion. They break multiple laws and they start to fight back and make it a fairer fight than just two random guys with guns against I don't know how many hundreds. In a strange way, this pagan cult, it feels a little bit like the so-called New World Order in another guilty pleasure movie from the previous year, 1986's Cobra, a movie which takes the form, we think that it's a serial killer story, but then it turns out that it's not really a serial killer story. It's a story about a gang of killers who call themselves the New World Order. And I don't mean Hulk Hogan's New World Order of Wrestling, brother. The NWO in Cobra is probably what inspired the Hulkster and Razor Ramon and Nash to call themselves the NWO, the New World Order of Wrestling, brother. Another interesting character actor who appears in Dragnet, it's kind of a pivotal role. It seems to be a throwaway, but his character is fairly important because he works for the Reverend Worley. Jack O'Halloran. Jack O'Halloran had been a boxer and a quite successful one. I think he was a ranked middleweight contender in the 60s. And he ended up in Superman, the OG Christopher Reeve, Marlon Brando, Richard Donner Superman, the first two films. He plays one of the trio of supervillains from Krypton, along with Sarah Douglas and the always fire, amazing Terrence Stamp. So he plays Non in the Superman movies. In this film, in Dragnet, he plays a guy called, and it's a great name, Emil Muzz. Emil Muzz. And his kind of highlight in the film is to piss off both Sergeant Joe Friday and Pep Streebek. And they bring him in for questioning, and it is a comedic highlight of the film. A little bit of a stretch. See, that even in a movie like this, you have moments where the guilty pleasure idea is one thing and the idea that the movie is trash is something else. But then there are things that don't feel right relative to the characters. So in the world of the film, they're questioning this guy. They know that something is rotten in the state of Denmark, but they don't know what, and they know that this guy, Emil Muzz, is connected to it. I don't remember how they knew that, but they know that. So they try to question him, the two guys. They try to question him, and Dan Aykroyd is like bad cop, and Tom Hanks is kind of playing good cop, and he's threatening him, and nothing is happening. And Jack O'Halloran, as Emil Muzz, says, listen, get my attorney. I want chewing gum, Snickers bar. I want my fucking lawyer. So Tom Hanks, again, doing good cop, he kind of says, all right, let's just take a break, Joe. Maybe if you want to get us some coffee and maybe a Danish or get him a Snickers bar. So Aykroyd is not happy about it, but he leaves. And as he's going to get the goodies for the guy that they're questioning, well, Pep Streebek is engaging in illegal behavior. He is violating I don't know how many amendments. He's torturing the suspect to get a confession. He's pulling a Harry Callahan from Dirty Harry where it says, listen, I know you kidnapped this girl. You left her in a hole to die. Where is she? I want my lawyer. No. Where's the girl? I have rights. Where's the girl? And then he tortures him to within an inch of his life. Well, it doesn't go quite that far in Dragnet, but it goes far enough where when Sergeant Joe Friday comes back into the room, Emil Muzz is sweating, and now he's singing like old Beverly Sills. I had never heard of Beverly Sills. I had to ask in the pre-era, who's Beverly Sills? Oh, just a famous singer. Oh, he was singing like Beverly Sills. Got it. Nicely done. And then he talks, but comes to a point where he says, I'm not telling you another word until my attorney gets here. And Tom Hanks smiles at Dan Aykroyd and says, Joe, wouldn't a couple of Danishes go great with this coffee? The implication being he's going to torture him a little bit further to get more information. Now, the scene works. It's funny. Tom Hanks was only pretending to be good cop. Now it's actually bad cop, worse cop, because Sergeant Joe Friday was not going to torture him. He wasn't going to do anything like that. He was just trying to get the confession out of him the old-fashioned way. And, well, Pep Streebek, I don't give a shit. Go ahead and complain to my superior. Let me know what they say about that. They're just going to say you're full of shit. You just didn't want to cooperate. But honestly, given what we're presented in the story, I don't believe that Joe Friday would have gone along with that. They go to great pains to show how much of a by-the-book cop he is. But he's going to smile and think it's okay to torture a suspect? Well, that's not really very by-the-book. If they had established a character as being distinctively different from his uncle, the original Joe Friday, okay. But the movie doesn't make any attempt to do that. And even as a kid watching that scene, I was scratching my head like, he's not even going to tell his partner, you can't do this? He doesn't raise any objection, nothing. In Dirty Harry, we are led to believe that Harry Callahan is willing to bend the rules. He is willing to interpret the law as he sees fit, if in his estimation, I got to get the job done. You told me to find the girl. This motherfucker kidnapped her, raped her, left her in a hole to die. You're worried about the fact that I broke the man's leg? I could have just killed him and it would have been a clean shot, but I was trying to find the girl. The job you tasked me with. Bring this guy the money, find the girl he took. I got the job done. Fuck all y'all. It is a little bit of an issue in Dragnet. It does stick out like a sore thumb. So the movie has these kind of relatively large action sequences, but nothing crazy, no CGI, no special effects. It's just straightforward actors and occasionally stuntmen, Dan Aykroyd, Tom Hanks trading fire with the bad guys. And the movie does hold to the concept, and you can tell that Sergeant Joe Friday is struggling with the idea that he is going the extra mile and a half. He is risking life and limb for a guy he can't stand in Jerry Caesar. He's the sort of person who is going to moralize, and he does not like the fact that this guy is worth $100 million and he's a porn merchant. He's a sleazeball. But you know what? As Jerry Caesar says, before you go home polishing your pennies, get my magazine back on the rack where it belongs. I'm a businessman. You can take issue with it, but you know I'm not breaking any laws here. And Dabney Coleman's accent, I don't even know what he was doing as far as the accent, but almost every line reading by Dabney Coleman is a home run. He is brilliant in this role. This is when he passed. A lot of people talked about in 9 to 5 and Tootsie and other films. He did the film Short Time. He was kind of coming to the end as sort of leading man type stuff in that movie. But Dabney Coleman was an actor. He was so distinctive. Even in a film like War Games, where his character, although he's a good guy, it's kind of an antagonistic character almost until the very end. Dabney Coleman was somebody that could take a molehill and turn it into a mountain. He just had that ability to craft what appeared to be living, breathing characters out of thin air. And he does it here in Dragnet. And you can argue that his performance is a highlight of the film because it's so absurd, but it works. We believe this guy is like this. Jerry, remember you're getting your pores sucked at 3. Well, as you see, I have stuff to do, and I'm a busy man, and why don't you get my magazine back on the stand where it belongs? More or less. But running through all of this, the action comedy beats of our intrepid heroes attempting to take down this satanic cabal, or whatever it is, you have a very tentative and kind of G-rated courtship between Sergeant Joe Friday and the virgin Connie Swale. And Aykroyd dials back his mannerisms in the scenes where he's alone with the virgin Connie Swale. And Alexandra Paul has such a natural quality to her. She never comes across as a rehearsed actress. She comes across like a regular person. And it's not something you see all too often, especially in a sort of trashy studio film like this. But when she delivers her lines, and the scenes that she has with Aykroyd almost feel like they come from a different movie entirely, she speaks with such sincerity and such warmth and kindness. It just radiates off of her in waves. You can see him soften. And the stakes appear to go up because he really grows to care about her in a very short period of time. And this is a movie where it very easily, the kind of romantic subplot between Joe Friday and the virgin Connie Swale, it could be a throwaway. But Aykroyd is never better than he is in the scenes with her. And Alexandra Paul, she's really good. She sells it. We believe this character is exactly who she says she is. Now, I'm going to have to spoil a little bit. I'm not going to tell you how the film wraps up in terms of the main beats of plot. Does the Reverend Worley get away with it? Does Jerry Caesar end up getting screwed out of money and out of his magazine being on shelves after all? But the film has a really extraordinary reaction shot of Tom Hanks, which contemporary audiences who know Tom Hanks as a much older guy, seeing him at age 29 or 30 is going to be jarring. But Tom Hanks has a moment right at the end of the film where he does a double take, and he has an incredulous reaction that is it's so over the top, it's funnier than it would be if he had a normal surprised reaction. So the guys are now on the same page. It's the typical buddy movie where they had issues, although I never sensed that Pep Strebeck didn't like Joe Friday. It was more the other way around. But the guys are now on the same page. Strebeck understands Joe a little bit better, and Joe Friday also gets the fact that Strebeck is unconventional, and I probably wouldn't want to hang out with this guy if he wasn't my partner, but he's a good cop, and he's much more on the ball than he appeared when we first met and just thought the guy was fucking nutcase or a lunatic, just a layabout and a bum. He's a good cop. He's young, he's a kid, but I can work with this guy. So the two guys are getting ready to head into police headquarters, and Dan Aykroyd, it's been a tough case, and he yawns. People yawn. I've been known to yawn at 5 a.m. at Bev Francis Powerhouse Gym. It doesn't mean anything. Sometimes you're tired. So he yawns, and Tom Hanks, as Pep Strebeck, says, "Oh, were you up a little late last night, Joe? I thought the Christian Science reading room closed at 10. Dan Aykroyd gives Tom Hanks a glare and says, "Not that it's any of your business, Mr. National Enquirer, but I had the privilege of spending a quiet evening in the company of Connie Swale." Okay. But Tom Hanks says, "Whoa, Joe, Connie Swale? Don't you mean the virgin Connie Swale?" And Dan Aykroyd turns, face the camera, and face Tom Hanks, and he levels him with his gaze. Levels him. And Tom Hanks all but jumps out of his shoes because he quickly translates why he phrased it that way, why he called her Connie Swale after going an hour referring to her repeatedly and all of the characters, the virgin Connie Swale. And after Hanks almost jumps out of his shoes, Dan Aykroyd doesn't smile, but he raises his eyebrow just enough. We get the point, credits roll, fade out. And it is a great ending, objectively speaking, a great ending. And it's not the ending that you necessarily were expecting, but when you look back on the movie, you say, yeah, in a cockeyed way. And I'm going to reference Citizen Kane, which has absolutely nothing to do with Dragnet. But in the movie Citizen Kane, the character of Susan, who Charles Foster Kane takes up with after the dissolution of his marriage, she can sing, but she really has no business pursuing it, opera, becoming a famous singer. She's not good enough. Now, what had happened in the story is that Charles Foster Kane had a love nest. He and his wife were on the outs, and he had a love nest with a singer, this woman Susan. The newspaper put the word singer in quotes, and Charles Foster Kane's ego would not let that stand. So he spent a shit ton of money, which he had to spend, to transform her into an actual singer. And why? He just wanted to take the fucking quotes off. He wanted her to be called a singer, not a singer. Dan Aykroyd saw to it. The virgin Connie Swale is no longer. She's just Connie Swale. Light 'em up. This has been episode 231 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday morning with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 232 real soon. Till then, peace.